This is the annual meeting for 2023, and there's a lot to get done. This is the part that you didn't really come to hear, but which you are forced to do. And so on your chairs, you will see or have seen, there's the 2023 annual report, the minutes from the 2022 annual meeting, and the 2023 election ballot. So the first thing I have to do as president is I have to ask if I have approval of the minutes from the 2022 annual meeting. All in favor that the minutes are okay? All right. Anybody think there's something wrong? I'll shoot you. Thank you. All right. I am not going to read my message because it's in there. But I do want to begin by saying thank you to Louise Glover for the years, and may I say years, that she has spent as secretary of the Crestwood Historical Society. I am not sure whether she remembers, but she started in 2009. From 2009 to 2011, she was the secretary. Then in 2012, she agreed to be co-president with Gigi Carnes. And then from 2013 through November 4th, 2023, she has been the secretary for the Crestwood Historical Society. So thank you, thank you, thank you. Now, for whatever reason, she has decided that she is willing to pass the baton on to somebody else. As you can see on the election ballot that we're going to be getting to, that space is blank. So what we're looking for is someone who's going to step up and say, me, I want to be the secretary of the Crestwood Historical Society. And if you think you might be that person, Louise is here. I'm sure she would be willing to talk to you. I am here. I would be more than willing to talk to you. So please, if you or you know someone who might be interested in being involved with the Crestwood Historical Society as treasurer, as secretary, please step forward. I also want to thank Chris Fryer. When his father died, Chris stepped in and filled a very large hole that Fred's death left. Chris has done our e-blasts for us. He edits everything I write. Thank you. Thank you. You don't know how much you should say thank you to him. He adds his knowledge in helping us set this program up and much, much more. And although he is stepping down from the board, he has agreed, because I twisted his arm very badly, to continue as in an emeritus position. But I want to say thank you to Chris, to his family, for everything that they have contributed to the Crestwood Historical Society. Yes. I also want to thank the board, some of whom are here today. Marie Posner is here today. I don't have my glasses on, so I'm obviously Conrad, because he's going to be talking. So if you want to come up and talk to us about what we do and maybe being involved, please feel free to come up to any of us. But their time, insight, and suggestions have been just really great help. Z and the Crestwood, who's the Crestwood librarian here, and the staff have been so supportive of our programs, and our members who are, I feel like when I wrote this, I felt like I was doing an NPR thing. You, our members, are what makes this place go, and unfortunately, it is true. So your membership dues is really what allows us to continue. Yes, Matt, without him, although he's telling me I have to push buttons here, so hopefully I will be able to do that too. Jackie, who is our treasurer, her report is part of the annual report as well, but she had something she wanted to ask you in addition to that. So Jackie, do you want to come up and say present your few words before we go on?
I am archiving all of the records that were in the back room from Crestwood Historical Society and ones that belong to Crestwood, meaning the old pictures. I have documents from 100 years ago. It's really interesting. I'm digitally archiving them, so because they're getting old. if any of you have any pictures or memories or anything you want to share that go back, I don't care what time, place, well, here in Crestwood, it would be very helpful to fill in some gaps, especially any memories of the Carnegie Library. That's the one thing I'm working on now. So the one that was downtown in Yonkers. All right, thank you.
All right, and now for this year, we have a lot of people that are up for renewing their positions. Once again, if any of you want any of these positions, please feel free to stand up and say, I would like to run for that office too. All right. So the first one is Karen Frederick, who is running for president. All in favor? Okay. Vice president is Conrad Youngren. All in favor? Treasurer is Jackie Leone. All in favor? And for the board, we have Bill Carnes, whose term, he extended it for one more year, so his term now ends in 2024. Kurt Neidart, who's working on our website. Marie Posner, who is here, and Steve Ulrich, who unfortunately could not be here today. All in favor for board members? All right, there we go. So thank you. That concludes the business part of the meeting. And but just a reminder that renewal letters, we changed to a once a year. So renewal letters will start to go out in November and December. So you can look forward to that. And now I'm going to turn the program over to Conrad.
Thank you, Karen. I'll call you back in a few minutes. We decided a while ago that this, at the annual meeting, we'd have a tripartite presentation centered on this area. You can see this aerial view, the Google Map view of part of our neighborhood, including what's now called Crestwood Lake. It wasn't always called that. In fact, there was a Crestwood Lake that was part of the bulge of the Bronx River north of the Oval. Maybe you skated on it at one time. That was called Crestwood Lake at one time. But this is the current Crestwood Lake area. And this talk in three parts is going to concern with this particular area of Crestwood. And it has three parts, as I mentioned. I'm going to talk about this area as a watershed, which in the late 1800s and early 1900s, it was part of the local water supply. Then later, the area is known for the St. Eleanor's home, which was located in this region, and Karen will talk about that. And we were going to have a speaker from the seminary to tell us the story of the last half a century of this property when it became the Orthodox Seminary. They have a convocation going on right now, so they couldn't attend in person, but Steve Ulrich made a wonderful little filmed interview of the president of the ceremony, and we'll conclude this presentation with that video. Well, I'm going to start with the watershed part of this tripartite effort. And that was the waterfall. It was around 1914 that picture was taken. There was an upper waterfall and a lower waterfall. I think this was the upper one. Crestwood Lake wasn't as large as it is now at the time, but that's sort of the icon for this talk at the head of the Troublesome Brook. I found this map and it's labeled. It was labeled Younkerstown, one word, and I cropped part of it. You can see it gets dark at the bottom because this was from a book, And when you try to take a picture of a book, as it gets close to the crease, it gets dark there. But it's the eastern part of Yonkers. You can see this dotted line that was the border of Yonkers at one time, and then there's the Eastchester Scarsdale border here, and we see Scarsdale Road, which is a very old path. Whoops, I didn't mean to do that. Which was a very old path that that traveled up from Tuckahoe, traveled north, got to where now it's Old Army Road branches off. I don't think it was called Old Army Road in 1783. Maybe it was, but it went up and it joined what is now Central Avenue. There was no Central Avenue, but it continued up to where it joins Central Avenue now, and then up into White Plains, and it's called Scarsdale Road here, but in or Old Army Road or whatever, but in White Plains it was called Tuckahoe Road. So there's two Tuckahoe roads, and if you lived in White Plains, the Tuckahoe Road was the one that led you to Tuckahoe, down through what's now Crestwood, and of course if you lived over in downtown Yonkers, Tuckahoe Road took you to Tuckahoe too. So all roads seem to lead to Tuckahoe at this time. I'm blowing this up a little bit to concentrate on the area right here now Crestwood, and you can see at the bottom that circle there is the telltale switchback of Underhill Road. Goes back and forth and comes down and around a little cemetery there and meets Scarsdale Road. And according to this map, the lower part of the southern part on the east side of Scarsdale Road belonged to Sherrard, but I think that is a misspelling of Sherwood, misspelling by the cartographer here. The next plot belonged to Cartwrights. You remember Ben, Adam, Haas, and Little Joe. That's where they started, and the upper part it was a Lent property. Lent was a big family that, from the Dutch days. An old New York and Westchester family from the Dutch days. They're somewhere rattling around in my family tree. I don't know whether this particular Lent, what leaf this particular Lent is. On the west side of Scarsdale Road was Joe Smith. No, not that Joseph Smith. Property, and the stream that ran through his property was known as Smith's Creek or Smith's Brook. And if you follow that up and back upstream from the Bronx River, it leads into the Bronx River there at the bottom. I got to be careful when I move the cursor around here. When it moves into the Bronx River, and you take it back to the to where the little circle is there, there's no lake. Doesn't show any Crestwood Lake or any other pond there where the circle is. And then it continues down to what is now Central Avenue. So either the water's flowing uphill from Central Avenue.
I just hope they can't really see it, so I'm just gonna turn on your little laser pointer. Okay.
Okay, yeah, that's
Now they can
but
see.
yeah,
All
very good, very good, very good. Okay, so either this is flowing uphill, or what I pretty much think is that area on the top of what's now the seminary was just a watershed. It was a swamp fed by springs, and the water flowed both ways. Flowed down through what we now call Troublesome Brook into the Bronx River, and also flowed along a waterway that ran along what is now Central Avenue And that part, Smith's Brook, was the lower part. The upper part was called, ready for this? Troublesome Brook. So Troublesome Brook was was running north along Central Avenue. Smith's Brook was running south along Scarsdale Road from the same watershed. Okay, move ahead, I guess 3 wars, 80 years or so. And some things look the same. There are some name changes here. The Lents are still around, but now Underhill seems to own the right-hand side. I thought that the Yonkers Park Association bought the land from the Sherwoods, but this shows an Underhill occupier of that. And on the no longer Joseph Smith on the west side, a Vermilion family. And right there's a little pond now where Troublesome Brook flows both ways, flows out of that pond down to the Bronx River and out of that pond along Central Avenue. And there is a tannery there. There's a little pond there now, you can see. So perhaps a small dam was constructed by the tannery. Maybe they used a water wheel for some of the machinery in the tannery. I don't know, but this is 1867, and things are about to change pretty radically, in part due to the Yonkers Park Association real estate development group, and in part due to this guy. This is Mr. Adrian Islin. He was a immigrant from Switzerland, I think, and became a magnate in the late 1800s. He sort of looks like a Gilded Age guy, right? Why did a Gilded Age folk look like that? I don't know. Anyway, he was an entrepreneur. He was into real estate. He owned sources of coal and iron and shipped them to Pittsburgh. He had businesses in the Pittsburgh area, and even further west. There are towns in Indiana or whatever that are named after him and his children. And he had railroads that carried the Adrian, Indiana, I think, is one that carried his goods back and forth across Pennsylvania. And he was a patron of the arts. He was one of the founders of the Metropolitan Opera. He owned the property that the Metropolitan Opera House was built on. And he was one of the co-founders of the Metropolitan Museum of Art and the Natural History Museum, and he was a founder of the ASPCA. So he was the Gilded Age patron. He was married to this woman, Eleanora O'Donnell, and she was also a very wealthy person, came from a very wealthy family. In her ancestral tree is some of the, well, she was very, very Catholic, and her ancestors included the first Catholic bishop in the colonies. One of her ancestors founded Georgetown University. She was a very wealthy woman, and when she died just before the turn of the century, all her holdings went to her husband, Adrian. About this time, well, they had 7 children, I think, yeah, 7. two of whom you're going to hear more about in today. There was Adrian Jr. And Georgine. You'll hear a lot about Georgine in Karen's talk, and there were five others. One of them, O'Donnell, they called him. He was Columbus O'Donnell. Was married to an Astor, so this was a pretty well connected family. Adrian Sr. retired in the late part of the 19th century, and he was concentrated on, he turned his businesses over to his sons, and it was concentrated on developing real estate in the New Rochelle area. He owned most of what is now Davenport Neck, and he had mansions along that. He had a mansion, and his family had mansions along there. I believe at least one of them is still around as a like a wedding facility or something, a country clubhouse or something over on Davenport Neck. And at about this time, he and his sons, 1884, okay, created the New Rochelle Water Company in order to, as New Rochelle was growing in population, he thought that he bought real estate and he was damming up creeks all over the place to create reservoirs. He owned most of what is now Eastchester, the unincorporated part of Eastchester, the part of Eastchester that's not Tuckahoe and it's not Bronxville. That part, he owned a good chunk of that. And this is a map of Eastchester. It's a little light. It might be hard to see, but west is to the top of this map, north to the right, and the horizontal line at the top is the railroad, is the Harlem Division Railroad. In the middle, the line going left to right is White Plains Road, Route 22 now. And you can see vertically on the left, there's Mill Road here, and then on the right, there's Wilmot Road. And he owned most of this area. This was his holdings. His holdings occupied most of that space, which was part of the town of Eastchester. But basically between the Hutchinson River and White Plains Road, he owned most of that land, or he bought most of that land because he was going to start damming up creeks and rivers. And his first project was he put a dam in the Hutchinson River and created what was later called Reservoir Number 2. Reservoir Number 2 was created first. It still exists. It doesn't have this shape anymore, but it's down by where the Cross County branches off the Hutchinson River Parkway. What's that called? Chester Heights area was the first reservoir he created, and his company created 1890 Reservoir Number 2, which was created before Reservoir Number 1, which is the second dam he built in the Hutchinson River that created the lake that is now called Lake Innisfree. Is the lake just south of Lake Isle. Well, Lake Isle of Innisfree is the William Butler Yeats poem, I guess. That's how that came to be. But Interlake and Lake, I used to call it as a kid, was got called Reservoir Number 1. I'm not sure how the numbers came that way. It would be like, we had the World War, it didn't have a number, and then we had a second one. They said, oh, this one's even bigger. We'll call this World War 1, and then call the other smaller one World War 2. But that didn't happen. A more modern map, I took this from some atlas. There's the on the lower right-hand corner, there is the Hutchinson River Parkway. And then there's California Road that runs up the right-hand side as well. And reservoir number 2, which was damned first, is still there. It's on the right hand. If you're going north on the Hutchinson River Parkway and you pass the exit for the cross county, on your right, there is a body of water. It's hard to see in the summer. The foliage is in the way, but in the fall and the winter, you can see it. That's the first reservoir, which became to be known as reservoir number 2. Reservoir number 1 is the one you probably recognize more readily. It's the one by Lake Isle there and Interlake and along California Road. And then in between the two was the third reservoir, 1907. So now we're into the 20th century. This is now called Twin Lakes. And there's a bridle path that goes around it off California Road. Maybe from it's a nice walk to walk around the bridle path there on at Twin Lakes. That was number 3. And there was a pump house in Eastchester, still there, and off California Road, near where the road goes into Lake Isle. There's a pump house that transferred water back and forth, but it still wasn't enough water in supply. So Mr. Island purchases a big chunk of land on the west side of Scarsdale Road, and he calls it Reservoir number 4. At least the numbering system makes sense. All right, because there were 3 by that time. And you can see how much land the Islands control. A lot of it is in his daughter's name, Georgine. The chunk in the middle there around the lake, around reservoir number 4, is in the New Rochelle Water Company, which it doesn't exist as a New Rochelle Water Company, but it was changed hands a couple of times. It was Suez for a while, and now it's WJWW. I think it's Westchester Joint Waterworks is a descendant of the New Rochelle Water Company. So you recognize here now that Crestwood is, well, it's not built up as much as it looks like in this map. It's zoned. All right, so those little boxes there are property lots. They're not all built on. And likewise, on the right-hand corner there is what was called Monrovia Park. That was divvied up too, although it wasn't really built. There weren't many houses there in 1910, and it's hard to see. But if you look down at the bottom, here, you'll see that I live on Ridge Street, which is the second street up here. Here, there's another street, Bronxdale Road. It doesn't exist anymore, or maybe never existed. It was on the maps that ran along was actually in the floodplain of the Bronx River. I threw in this map of Eastchester at about the same time, 1910, to show this little creek in Eastchester that runs down from about the Lake Innisfree area, runs down and goes under the tracks and joins the Bronx River. All right, so that's right where that tunnel is today. And one of my quests is to find out the history of that tunnel. I have not been able to find out exactly when that tunnel was built. I suspect, although I don't know, that there was a culvert under the tracks that carried this stream. That wasn't the tunnel we know today. It wasn't a trafficked tunnel.
Just based on the architecture, it's about 1910.
It's about what?
About 1910, the tunnel.
I'd suspect it was about that because that is the time they overhauled the railroad. The railroad was electrified between 1905 and 1915, and there was a mammoth amount of work done in straightening, in leveling, and going from 1 track to 4 tracks on that railroad, as well as electrification. And they eliminated all ground level crossovers. All right, they eliminated them in Bronxville, eliminated in East. All of the walk across the tracks when it became electrified had to be eliminated. So I assume that that's about the time they built the tunnel, that there was something there before that, but it wasn't the tunnel. Wasn't the tunnel we know now. But at this point in 1910 is when this pipeline was laid. Okay, that ran down underneath St. Eleanor's, what's now St. Eleanor's Lane. All right, and across underneath the Bronx River, underneath the railroad tracks to the Troublesome Brook pumping station, still called the Troublesome Brook pumping station. It's now owned by WJWW, Westchester Joint Waterworks. It's not really a pumping station anymore. It's a treatment plant, but it's the same location. Some of the brick and mortar is, I assume, original. There's been a lot of renovation, including a lot very recently. So here's another map at around the same time, a little bit later, because the Bronx River Parkway is now here. Okay, the Bronx River Parkway opened in 1925, but as early as 1920, there was the roadbed was present in this area, not the whole length, but the parkway itself opened in 1925. And you can see here that there is development plans for the Reynolds property between St. Eleanor's Lane and what was called Monrovia Park. There's no Schultz Field, there's no Annunciation Church, but they had laid out a development, including this Hawthorne Street, which would run up from Hollywood, run up and join Crestfield at the corner of Crestfield and Agnola and whatever. But that obviously there's Schultz Field is there now. There's no road through that. There is a Schultz Street here that runs through what is now Schultz Field. You can see that Miss Island still owns a good chunk of the land on both sides of Crestfield, it seems, as well as land to the south. And here's a picture. I love this picture. This was taken around 1925. It shows the Leawood Country Club, which opened in 1924. It shows the pumping station. It's not, unfortunately, not labeled as Troublesome Creek pump station, but the pump station is there. And it shows the bridge at the end of St. Eleanor's Lane that went across the Bronx River and led down to the Bronx River Parkway. Now, that's a whole nother story that I'm very interested in. That bridge is rumored to have been around for a long time. It was certainly there mid or early 19th century. It may have been there even, or some version of it might have been there in the even in the 18th century. Livestock was driven across it and down to fields on the other side of the railroad tracks, and up what is now Leawood Drive up to 22, and they were driven to market in New Rochelle, etc. So that bridge has been there for a long time. I'm very interested in it. It plays a role here. It's part of that. I'm sure the reason that the path was chosen for the pipeline had in part to do with that bridge. And if you tromp through the woods at the end of St. Eleanor's Lane, you'll find the abutment is still there. This is the bridge abutment for that bridge. And if you climb on top of it and through the brambles you look straight into the tunnel. So that's where the bridge was. This I was standing or sitting or crawling or something on top of the abutment and I took this picture. Here's a picture I found of that bridge from 1916. This was taken as part of the survey for the Bronx River Parkway. It was taken from the bottom of Chuana Street looking south, and you can barely make out that there is in the distance there, there is a bridge that goes across, and you can see the floodplain was a swampy area there, and the bridge goes down onto the floodplain, and then by 1916, probably that tunnel was built. And so if there was still livestock being driven down there, it would go in through the tunnel. Before that, I assume that was a grade crossing there, and there was just a little culvert for the water to come down from above. And I found this picture, and it's purported to be that bridge. I think it is. It's taken from the south, looking north. The St. Elmo's Lane would be on the left here, and then the bridge would head down to the floodplain and then on through the tunnel. This is obviously before the Bronx River Parkway. But you'll note that the Bronx River is on the east side of the parkway until just below the tunnel. Then it goes underneath the parkway, runs along the Crestwood side for just a little bit, and then goes back to the east side of the parkway and continues. So I don't know what that means, actually. So where do we get our water from now? We don't get it from Crestwood Lake anymore. We're not drinking Crestwood Lake, and we're not drinking Lake Innisfree. Nobody is. None of those are part of the reservoir system. In the early part of the century, two great aqueducts were built: the Catskill Aqueduct and the Delaware Aqueduct, that come down from the other side of the Hudson River. The Catskill one sort of stops off, makes a stop at the Croton Reservoir System. That is, the Croton Reservoir System is literally a reservoir. It's like a surge tank on top of the aqueduct. And the Delaware one enters the Kensico system and then continues down along Scarsdale Road. We'll see that in a second. Both of them terminate, both the Delaware and the Catskill terminate at the Hillside or Hillview Reservoir, which is on the Major Deegan, just south of the racetrack. They both terminate there, and then from there are three big tunnels that carry water into New York City. Here, this is I shouldn't have turned the map this way. This is a little strange. We're looking down on the corner of Crisfield and Scarsdale Road. Here's Crisfield, comes down here. Scarsdale Road goes north to Fatima this way and goes south to St. Vladimir's this way. This is Agnola in here, if we can sort of place that. There's a pumping station on the north side of that intersection that is owned by Yonkers. That is a Yonkers public station. It's not New York State, not New York City. It's not Westchester Joint Waterworks. It's owned by Yonkers, although there is some equipment there that belongs to WJWW. But it routes water to a number of places. I'm not exactly sure where they get the water from. They're not I spent some time with the folks at WJWW, very nice guy there. They don't really want to talk about exactly where these lines are. And I can understand it. I can understand that. I look like a terrorist, so there's no reason. Well, at this intersection, the Delaware Aqueduct goes past this intersection, and on the south side of the intersection, there is shaft 22. Maybe that's what you were referring to. Shaft 22 is a hub for water coming out of the Delaware Aqueduct. It's a vertical shaft. The Delaware Aqueduct, when it crosses St. Vladimir's, anyway, I don't know right at this point, but when it goes under St. Vladimir's, is 230 feet below ground. 230 feet. It's a 25-foot diameter tunnel. It's 230 feet below ground, and this is a vertical shaft that comes off of that aqueduct.
Oh, that's
And they can tap off on the way up. They can tap off and distribute water from the Delaware Aqueduct to various places, and that's what they were not going to tell me as to what goes where. Okay, there are a number of water lines. You'll see in a second. There's a number of water lines here. This is shaft 22. This is the secret headquarters of shaft 22 there at the corner. And there were some people there the other day, and unfortunately I had to go to a dentist or something. Otherwise, I would have stopped and said, can I see what's in there? And
when you call Youngren, you ask about this, they'll never tell you.
yeah,
I run into that.
yeah, no, but that's shaft 22. And that's a major distribution hub for our water today. Right, it pumped water from Reservoir 4, which is Crestwood Lake, to Lake Innisfree. That's what it was there for originally. It is still there now. Pipes go through it, and we'll see here that this map, the guy at St. Vladimir's let me look at this map. It's old, so it's probably not that sensitive anymore. There's a whole bunch of valves on the property of St. Vladimir's where they can route water in different directions down different mains. There's a whole bunch of mains, and this area where St. Eleanor's and Scarsdale Road meet, there's a whole bunch of these mains here. There's 10 inches and 16 inches and 24-inch mains that run down. There's a 24-inch main. No, there's a 48-inch main that runs down Scarsdale. That may be the one that broke. There's a 48-inch main that runs down Scarsdale Road. It was there in the mid to late 1800s. It ran from the Kensico watershed. Before there was a Kensico Dam, that was a watershed also. And there was something called the Bronx Pipeline. It's a 48-inch pipe that runs down Scarsdale Road. All right, and it's still there. It's still operated. It's been there for over 100 years, maybe almost 150 years. Yeah, maybe. And maybe that's the one that broke. But then there are other pipes that go east and west and under St. Eleanor's and come out at under the tracks and are routed either through, around, or by the pumping station that's there now. The Kensico does not treat the water anymore, so they had to renovate the pumping station in order to treat the water for it. And I know some of that water goes all the way over to Mamaroneck. Some of the water that goes through the Troublesome Brook pumping station goes all the way over to Mamaroneck. But now I think we want to move to the second part of this presentation, when the watershed property was no longer a source, or right at the end of its life as a source of domestic water, and the area owned by Georgiana became something else. And we'll let our president Karen tell us about that.
I want to start by saying that this is usually when we're ending the programs, and most of you are used to getting out of here before noon. So I want to ask you, we can skip mine and go straight to the video from the Reverend at St. Vladimir's, or we can, it's going to be up to you, because I can do my presentation or I can do it at another time. So how do you all feel? Do you want, go ahead? Okay, I'll try it. Now, first of all, this is going to be my first time doing this. Oh, look at that. All right. So I was going to begin, and I'll do this really fast because I did want to thank the people who helped me be able to do this. First was a woman by the name of Marguerite Oman. I don't know whether any of you remember her, but she lived here for forever and forever. And she did a lot of research on St. Eleanor's and wrote the information for the very first Crestwood Historical Society website. Then there was a woman by the name of Sister Maria Paula Holdman. She spoke to the Crestwood Historical Society on St. Eleanor's in June of 2003. And I loved it when she said, because she worked at St. Eleanor's, and she said, it was 1946 when I was assigned to summer duty at St. Eleanor's to relieve sister nurses, social workers, and personnel in our hospitals to allow everyone to enjoy some seasonal vacation. I was intimidated by the prospect of overseeing little boys, ages 6 to 9 years of age, whose mothers were recuperating after hospitalization. And I also want to thank Bobby and Alan Bryson, who bought all of the postcards that you're going to see here that give visuals to my speech and donated them to us. Mindy Gordon is now the archivist for the Sisters of Charity, and she opened up what they had for me to see. And of course, my favorite, newspapers. So this newspaper actually marks the sort of the formal opening or completion in a way of a dream. It dates to May 27th, 1901, when Archbishop Corrigan dedicated St. Eleanor's home for convalescent patients. The home will be open to convalescent patients from the hospitals of New York who can remain there in charge of doctors and nurses. That was not true, you'll find out later, and enjoy the country air until they are cured. It was given by Miss Georgiana Islin in memory of her mother, Mrs. Eleanora O'Donnell Islin, who died in New Rochelle in 1897. Now, I am going to refer to her as Georgine Islin, despite the fact that in the New York Times, she has been referred to as Georgie Islin and as Georgina Islin. But in the 1916 Articles of Incorporation, her name is listed as Georgine, and I'm going with the 1916 Articles of Incorporation. I usually have this as a notebook, but I can't do that on this thing here. Now, let's see if I can do this. There. I want you looking at these to try and imagine you are coming from a poor neighborhood in New York City in the early 1900s out to this. I can't even begin to imagine what it must have seemed like when they came from the train station and arrived here. The dedication of this place was a realization of a dream, a wish, and I can't believe it wasn't brewing long before Eleanor O'Donnell Islin died. But according to Sister Maria Paula Holdman, at least it started in August of 1900 when Adrian Islin agreed to the founding of St. Eleanor's. The Islin family agreed to defray all expenses for 1 year. And after that, under the auspices of Georgine, they would make permanent provision for the support of the project. The home there cost $50,000. It was a 2-story structure of native stone and tuckahoe. It sat on 200 acres of land owned by the Islin family, which would be open to, as one article said, inmates as opposed to patients. And it would accommodate approximately 50 patients at one time. And according to one article, the daughter and Mr. Islin took personal interest in, and supposedly came out almost every day to oversee its construction. Here you see, I love it. I don't think you can see this, but this says automobiles not admitted. However, they did allow horse and carriages. I just thought that was just such a fabulous concept. But I want you to know that they did eventually get a car. There was an article in June of 1915 saying the automobile used by the officials of St. Eleanor's home to convey visitors and patients to and from the home was damaged. How it was damaged was apparently the driver took a curve too fast and the car turned over. Now remember, that's back before seatbelts. But he, while the car was damaged, he miraculously escaped. Then in 1917, they advertised for a chauffeur for a Ford car, very specific. You had to be single, you got bored, it was a steady position, but references were required. So eventually they did come up to date. Let's see now. Right. These postcards give you some idea of what those 200 acres looked like back then. You have the classic waterfalls. You have Lake Georgine. You have, this is called a ladies' park. And then you just have a view into the park here. Just to give you a background about why this home was founded, toward the end of the 19th century, social service became increasingly aware that their role had to expand to include many needs other than little children. And St. Eleanor's was one of the first to take advantage of getting to mothers through the little children. Women convalescent patients from New York City hospitals were being discharged when they were judged 80% cured in order to turn their beds over to the acutely ill. The problem with this was that the cure depended on how the remaining 20% was accomplished. And many times everything the hospital did was lost because these women had to go back to what lives they were leading before they had this baby. To all the responsibilities, to whatever job they had to immediately go back to that. Hence the idea for Eleanor's. Georgine asked the Sisters of Charity of St. Vincent de Paul to come and staff and manage it. And they came up with a program of about 2 weeks of rest. The room arrangements envisioned about 27 adult patients with 19 children's rooms, nurseries for about 8 babies, and special accommodations for about 4 mothers with infants. 10 Sisters of Charity were brought from their hospital facilities in Westchester and the city. As all the expenses for the patients and running the home was assumed by the Island family, there was never a charge to any patient. Thereby, it became the first free Catholic convalescent home for anyone, regardless of creed or color in the United States. And all the fresh vegetables and dairy products were supplied via the Island farms. So it was basically self-sustaining. The original St. Adrian's Chapel was built at some distance from the main house. And this was back when they really had winters. So it proved to be difficult in bad weather. And so it was eventually built closer, and it was connected to the main house by an indoor ramp. A priest from the Assumption Church in Tuckahoe came over to offer Mass and other Catholic services. And there was a grotto that was blessed on August 15th, 1903. And these are 2 brochures that were that I found at the archives of the Sisters of Charity. And they give you some idea about what the home was set up for. It explains that in order to be admitted, you had to get a letter through some social agencies. That there was an admission day on Tuesdays in the afternoon. If you were a patient there and your 2 weeks were up, you had to leave by Tuesday morning. Except in emergencies, the home did not provide regular medical or surgical care, not what that 1901 news article said. Therefore, patients who were not capable of following the regular routine were not accepted. A registered nurse, one of the sisters, cared for minor ills like headaches or needing of laxatives, that kind of thing. Sleeping quarters for men were 2 flights up, for women 1 flight up. There was no elevator service, therefore patients had to be able to walk up and down stairs at least once a day. You were expected to bring toilet articles and clothing sufficient for 2 weeks, a sweater and, oh yeah, rubbers. And I loved it. They said how to reach it. You would go to Grand Central Harlem Division Line to the lower level to Crestwood. It was a 70 cents per trip. The taxi to the home was 25 cents. And visitors were permitted to visit on Sundays and Thursdays from 2 to 5. Another brochure pointed out the fact that, this is a home where you're now going to be with people you don't know. The aim is to preserve a home-like, happy atmosphere where rest and quiet will ensure the contentment that is so necessary for the restoration of health and strength. If this is your first experience of living with a group other than your own family, some adjustments may be required. Everyone coming to St. Eleanor's comes with the same purpose as you. The golden rule, do unto others as you would have them do unto you, is the standard for all patient relationships. When Georgine Island died in 1954, the Island Corporation for St. Eleanor's home dissolved. And because there was now no income coming in on a regular basis, they had to start charging. And the fee was $4.50 a day. So I said to myself, that doesn't seem like, that's worse than not having to pay anything. But so then I decided, well, I'll just look up, well, what was $4.50 in 1954 versus $4.50 today, So it turns out that it would have been, in today's dollars, $720 a day, or over $10,000 for a 2-week stay. So if they were reaching out to poor patients, I'm not sure who at that point could actually. But so you want to know, well, who did they serve? And how many did they serve? Remember when they dedicated it, it said that they would be able to care for 50 patients at one time. So they were to stay for 2 weeks. Now remember, math is not my strength, but that came up with 26 weeks times 50 patients, which would mean they were estimating 1,300 people a year. If you were here when I talked about how Crestwood got its name, there was this big kerfuffle over, really, was there such confusion between Yonkers Park and Yonkers Station? Well, Adrian Island came up and said that such confusion has been stated as absolutely absurd. In the time the home has been open, which at that point was 3 years and 2 months, none of the 3,000 annual visitors have been unable to find the station, and none of the 1,000 packages sent each year to the home go astray. That's a lot of people. In 1935, they said that there were 1,175 patients. In 1934, 1,222. So that gives you some idea of the number of people who were coming here. But what did people have to say about their stays? So these are some of the postcards where some of what people had to were sending to people when they were staying here. One was that I hope you be in good health and be happy. I like this place very much. Another one in 1906 said, just a line to let you know I am feeling very much better. In 1907, hoping you will let me hear from you. I am having a fine time. It's lovely up here. 1910, having a fine time here. In 1917, it's a beautiful place and the girls are lovely. We were picking flowers this morning with love to all the girls. And then in 1948, dear folks having a good time. In 1904, a children's cottage was built. So you can see this is the home, and then the children's cottage was built up here. It was also a 2-story gray stone building that cost $50,000. It was a cherished project of Georgine Island. It is said that she visited weekly the children who were sent from the hospital wards, clinics, and city tenements to enjoy 2 weeks of country air, nourishing food, and play facilities. It was open from June to September inclusive. It accommodated boys and girls from 6 to 14 years and mothers with children from infancy to 5 years. Children were required to bring with them a statement from a physician dated not less than 3 days prior to admission, to the effect that they were free from communicable diseases, and I love this, or other objectionable conditions. I'm not quite sure what the objectionable conditions were. But you have to realize that, of course, you're bringing in someone and to a place where there are people trying to recover. So they had to be careful about how healthy you were. And for those of you who've had children, we all know they're just like miniature petri dishes. They just bring everything home. And because of COVID, I think we also learned again about the Spanish flu. But there was another very serious epidemic in 1916, the New York City polio epidemic. And in the Bronxville Review had, in 1916, had the following article that the Crestwood Citizens Association, in view of the possibility of the children of Crestwood becoming infected from outside sources with infantile paralysis, and believing that its onset can be prevented by proper restrictive measures, if such measures are effected immediately, do respectfully petition that a restrictive patrol be established to inquire into the physical condition of all children and their guardians who seek to enter as temporary or permanent residents. It is respectfully petitioned that a guard or patrol properly instructed be stationed until further notice at the north and south entrances of Crestwood and at the Crestwood station, to halt all persons accompanied by children or children unaccompanied, and to inquire into the point from which such persons came, to call upon them for the production of a certificate of health signed by the proper health officer of the town, city, or village of the said person came, and to maintain this patrol until the necessity for it no longer exists. Now, 15 years after its establishment, a certificate of incorporation was filed for, and this makes it really clear what the purpose of the home is. The name was proposed was the St. Eleanor's Home for Convalescents, and the particular object for which the corporation is to be formed is the establishment and maintaining a hospital and home for indigent convalescents. So what you can see here is that while we've all been thinking that it's just mothers who were coming out to be able to recover after having given birth to a child, it was not. St. Eleanor's, while, as I said, is remembered primarily as a home for impoverished mothers to recuperate, the incorporation strictly states that it was a hospital and home for anyone. Neither sex nor reason for coming had to be that you were just given birth to a baby. So you have here where Adrian Island Jr. actually came out, and he had not been at business recently and has taken a cottage on the grounds of St. Eleanor's home where he is trying the rest cure. But I love this. Mr. Island drives about the grounds and is visited daily by relatives and friends. And then there was a patrolman, oops, right there, who came for treatment because he had been suffering from melancholia since the death of his mother, with whom he had made his home. And I found this interesting, that people actually wrote to the newspaper. Can you tell me of any home for convalescents in the county which will admit colored people? I am a young woman and need to get away for a time and would like to be near home. And the answer being St. Eleanor's Home for Convalescents will take colored or white women who are in need for convalescent care. The home is full a good many times, so it will be necessary for you to get in touch with the sister in charge and find out from her when there will be a vacancy. All details will be sent in regard to the terms of admission and if you will write to the home. But it was not a home. Where is it? Right there. It was not a home for, it was a home for convalescents, not for the aged. So if you were looking for that kind of home, you were told to get in contact with your pastor. But change was coming. In 1970, now remember, in 1917, there were 196 acres, and over time, land was sold. And as the land was sold, the money from the sale went into the funds. But when they started selling the lands, they started putting in restrictions and covenants, which will become important later on. And one of them being that when subdivided, no plot is said shall be smaller than 50 feet front on any street by 100 feet deep, and that any permanent building erected on any plot shall cost at least $7,500 to build. And now that I'm looking at it, I forgot to look up what that costs today, but that's what it was in 1925. And then, is that, I can't see. Yeah, right there, that in 1926, 40 houses were to be developed on this land. It was bought by the Newport Engineering Company of New York and renamed Brook Farm. Streets have been laid out, the main thoroughfare being Alta Vista Drive. Gas, water, and other improvements have been installed, and Spanish, English, Old English, and Dutch colonial homes are now rising in the development and will be ready for occupancy by the middle of November. Then, in 1935, Georgine wrote to Mother Vincenta of the Sisters of Charity, and she said, up to this present time, I have, as an individual, paid the money necessary for running the home. She paid for it out of her own funds, this amount being exempt from taxes. But the law having changed, I am obliged to pay taxes, and as this is too heavy a burden for me, and because remember, we're now in the Depression, I have made over a certain sum to the corporation for the purpose of running the home and allowing them to continue the way it was originally established. Now, remember back about the covenants and restrictions. You know, when I looked at this in 1960, that's not history. I was alive in 1960. Nothing is history that dates while I'm alive, but there was. And so some of you may be familiar with this. I didn't live here then, but there is the large parcel of the property was the storm of a center of protest. There was a proposal for six six-story apartment buildings housing 700 families with off-street parking. The second was for a 61 family homes with businesses or shopping center containing 108,000 square feet, with 24,000 of which would front on Scarsdale Road. Needless to say, there was a big protest about this because and part of it included the fact that the hunting lodge that was on the property was going to be made into a two-family dwelling, which, remember, that was not, it's all were supposed to be single-family homes. And the argument being that they were afraid that this was going to devalue the property values in the area. Now, 1960. 4 months later, Arson is hinted at in 2 fires in the Yonkers area. Fire Chief Andrew Gerlach has been called for the police investigation of fires which destroyed a 2-family house at 120 Pietro Drive Friday night and the former St. Eleanor's home Sunday morning. Both buildings, empty and isolated, had originally belonged to St. Eleanor's home. It had been, one of them was being altered into a 2-family house. Wonder why there might have been an arson. And the larger building had been sold to the city about 4 years ago. The house burned to the ground. Georgine Islin died on June 30th, 1954 at the age of 97. The Islin Corporation then dissolved and support became the responsibility of the Sisters of Charity. And by that time, the property had shrunk from 200 acres to 22 acres. And because of the difficulty of supporting an institution that had no incoming revenue, despite starting at $4.50, the sisters found the solution to maintaining the work of St. Eleanor's in perpetuity, as they had promised, with the selling of the property to St. Vladimir's in 1961. And it's this point now that I don't know quite how we turn this over to the Right Reverend Dr. Chad Hatfield, who is the current president of St. Vladimir's.
I'm Father Chad Hatfield. I'm the president of St. Vladimir's Orthodox Theological Seminary. I want to begin by just giving you a very, very brief history, since you're a historical society, of how Orthodox Christianity came to North America, specifically here in the Crestwood neighborhood of the city of Youngren, New York. We're the only Christian group that actually arrived from West Coast. And we arrived on Kodiak Island, a group of 10 missionaries who came all the way from the Russian-Finnish border, arriving in Kodiak on the 24th of September in 1794. And as the church grew, it expanded from Alaska down the coast to the California area, especially around San Francisco. Eventually then across heavy groupings in Minneapolis, and then here in New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, tri-state area. We've had various theological seminaries, beginning with the first one that was founded in Alaska by St. Innocent. But with the Bolshevik Revolution in 1917, 1918, the seminary that was then functioning, our only seminary in Tenafly, New Jersey, was closed for financial reasons. So we went from that period until 1938, when the residue or the Russian Orthodox hierarchs founded St. Vladimir's. And St. Vladimir's was founded in a very unique way. It was the 950th anniversary of the baptism of the Roost. And so they wanted the seminary to be a missionary seminary, an outreach seminary to America. But I think very prophetically in the documents, they say that America would become a very highly educated society, and therefore we need a very highly educated clergy in order to present our faith in what they described as what would truly become a very highly educated society. So the first location was very near Columbia University. There was, in fact, a collaborative relationship with them, so that if one of the candidates for seminary did not have an earned baccalaureate degree, they could do that at Columbia, and then begin their higher degree at the seminary. Eventually, we outgrew that space, and we were at Union Seminary for a period, General Theological Seminary for a period, and in 1962, this property became available. And we relocated here. There were actually just the 2 buildings on the campus at that point, a small wooden frame chapel, which is no longer there, and then this main rather substantive building in the center, which is now called the Germac building. By the way, just for a little historical aside, its name Germac for the family that began marketing pistachio to America. So they became benefactors here, and that building bears that name. The seminary has expanded considerably since 1962 in terms of buildings. There are now 18 substantial buildings on 12 acres. Two very relatively new buildings are the Wrangels building, which houses what has been described as the finest Orthodox Christian library in the Western Hemisphere. That's by James Billington, the former head librarian at the Library of Congress. And some would say that it may be the finest Orthodox library in the world, because during the communist era, of course, we were producing and acquiring and expanding. Only in this past year, we've also received the archives of the Orthodox Church in America from their headquarters on Long Island. That will increase the number of scholars and other academics who will be coming to do research not only in the library, but now in the archives. Our students comprise something like 19 different countries where they come from. Students come from India, from Egypt, from Ethiopia, from Armenia. So all that is blended here. There are in fact 3 chapels. The main one for the Eastern Orthodox seminarians I'm sitting in now, the 3 hierarchs, which was completed in 1983. Very interesting iconography in this particular structure. It bears, again, part of the history of the immigration here. Mostly white Russians, aristocrats, academics, people who were part of the Tsar's army, settled in Paris. They founded St. Third, a kind of mother institution to us in terms of theological education. And the iconography that we see in here was a part of a kind of school of iconography that was very precious to them. And this was actually completed by one of the Parisian iconographers. We also, again, have a mix of students in terms of single and married. Last year we had exactly 100 seminarians on campus, and 50 were married and 50 were single. I know when I was filling out the form, I thought people were going to think I've made this up because it just seemed too clean, but this year is pretty much about the same. I think we may be down 3 seminarians. We have a particular international standing. Last January, several of us from here, in fact, we were the largest delegation of any of the Orthodox seminaries, academies, institutes represented at an international gathering in Bowl, Greece. And again, I'm always humbled when I'm abroad because of the incredible respect that Orthodox people from other countries and non-Orthodox people as well have for St. Vladimir. One of the things that also probably should be noted here is the landscape of the campus. We do buttress Crestwood Lake at the top, and Troublesome Brook runs through the seminary. Many people think that we actually own the causeway and the waterfall. We don't. That belongs to the city of Youngren. But we've worked hard. I think that it's sort of keeping, the sense of the park-like atmosphere here. And one of the things we do every year on September 1st is we plant a new tree. So just simply the variety of trees that are now growing on this campus are quite incredible. That's in keeping with the Orthodox Christian understanding of the environment and our particular commitments to being responsible in that area, which we actually treat theologically. The seminary has a long history here in the Crestwood neighborhood of Yonkers. In fact, at the Annunciation Church, there's a plaque that commemorates the time when St. Vladimir Seminary had some building issues going on here, and we were using the lower level of Annunciation Church as our chapel. And that kind of relationship continued. Our relationship with St. Joseph Seminary in Dunwoody is extremely strong. We've actually done some choral projects together. A very famous one that was far more successful than we ever could have imagined is we put the 2 seminaries together for a concert down in the city singing hymns to the Mother of God, East and West. There is talk about us doing something similar in the future, maybe around our Lord's Passion. So we've enjoyed it. As I said, many years of being present here and this sort of exchange back and forth over the years. There's a lot of pressure on us in terms of the way that we need to make some adjustments in the future, and we continue to weigh how best to actually get to that point where we can shift, make the changes that are required of us in order to be a first-class, functioning, gold standard, 21st century theological seminary. So again, it's been my pleasure to be able to have this time with you. I look forward to some personal time. We've got some events in which, again, we're sharing the seminary and of course the Crestwood Historical Society.
So that ends our meeting for this year. I hope you all enjoyed it. If you have any questions, we are all here to answer them except for the Right Reverend, but we hope to see you again in 2024.